is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into an emergency edition of the Pegasus Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also email us at PegasusPodcast by KSN@gmail.com. Christian, it's been a while since we've done an emergency podcast, but it's not necessary. There are things changing, and I don't know if the results will change, but let's just get it out there. Ted Roof has been fired, and Addison Williams is being promoted back to his previous defensive coordinator position. He will be the defensive play caller going forward. And Gus Malzahn has relinquished play calling duties, and Tim Harris will be calling the plays on offense going forward. Thoughts?
Well, first off, happy birthday to Gus Malzahn. He turned 59 today, and I'm sure he's having a heck of a day.
Had to fire one of his friends.
Which I don't understand. I'm so confused on why Ted Roof was fired, because Malzahn has made very clear that they won a national championship together at Auburn in 2011 and that would somehow justify him. Let me ask you a question. Is it a bad sign when your defensive coordinator gets fired and multiple national media members are making jokes about how this is the billionth time they've been fired? Because we had Stuart Mandel, the college football editor at The Athletic, tweet, "This man may hold the record for most times getting fired." And we had Dan Wolken, who you all know, tweet, "You can fire Ted Roof as many times as you want, but there will always be another program ready to hire him again as defensive coordinator." Is that a good sign when you fire your DC and everyone's laughing about how this is the millionth time he's been fired?
It's probably not.
No.
I don't think that's good. And we can't say that we didn't see it coming. I mean,
we quite literally did. We've been talking about it for months on this podcast. I'm not a big victory lap guy, but wow, did I take one on Twitter this morning, because I wrote in late January, I wrote a piece for Night Sports Now about how all of the changes Gus had made, bringing in Ted Roof, deciding to take back play calling, and why I thought those were not only risky, but probably bad decisions. And I posted it. And it was not well received by our lovely readers and listeners, or even like other members of UCF media. That I got pretty hammered for that one. I just have to say right now, you should go read it. It's great. I ended up being a prophet, and I think that's awesome. And I just have to say really quickly that let's put all our cards out on the table. I'm not an intelligent person. I'm dumb, especially with like college football. And the fact that I was able to call what was going to happen from these decisions, dumb me. And the head coach who's being paid more than $5 million a year to win games here did not see it coming. That is a bow on top of what this year has been. Just baffling decisions that don't even age badly. We just call them out as baffling in the moment, and then they play out exactly like that. This was so predictable that the Ted Roof hire was going to fail, and here we are. Didn't even make it through a full season.
It was a disaster from the start. We talked immediately. Our initial podcast on it was, hey, this guy just got fired by Oklahoma like weeks ago, and people were happy that he got fired at Oklahoma. And all we could see was his resume of 1 year at all these different programs, his like previous 2-month stint at UCF before he left for Penn State, I think. And it just never felt like it was going to be the right thing. And I think it was you who put it the right way, where you said, like, this coordinator position should have attracted more interest. If you're going to truly if you're giving this new defensive coordinator truly he's taking over the reins from Addison Williams and not doing this weird co-defensive coordinator thing, there should have been a better candidate. And somehow there wasn't. Or I don't know, maybe there was, and Gus still went with his buddy. But it was never going to work, and it didn't work. At the same time, and again, it was funny today, shout out to Andrew Cherica, who did ask Gus during his press conference today about like what the distribution of task was when Roof was here with co-defensive coordinator Addison Williams, and Gus did not take the bait and would not get into it. But it was a good question. I mean, I'm glad he asked it, but we still, of course, got no answers. Saying all of that, this is the Ted Roof was bad, and he shouldn't have been hired. But this is also, he's being scapegoated too. Like, yeah. Gus is he's just making these moves to try to quiet the noise and be like, look, I'm doing stuff. Don't be mad at me anymore. And
I'm glad you said that so much, because we haven't talked a ton about this, and that was my thought as well, is while Ted Roof never should have been hired, and you are correct that this was a very enviable job, particularly since UCF has an offensive head coach, so a defensive coordinator would have been able to fully run a unit that should not have been hired, whatever. We get to this point, 2 units this season. one had been showing progress and had been improving, and that was the defense. We were talking about that. It felt like the defense was at least moving in the right direction in some ways, where the offense has just been stagnant and broken. So that's why it's extra funny is that Gus Malzahn said no to making a legitimate hire for this position to bring in a former coworker and a friend, and is now scapegoating that coworker and friend. I mean, does anyone believe with a straight face that this is fixing the season? That removing Tooth is going to make the team magically amazing and they're going to go on a crazy run here? And what makes it even more funny is who's back in charge of the defense now. Addison Williams, who this was all started when in a surprise move, Gus said he can't run the defense. I'm demoting him and bringing in someone who can. And now 8 games later, he's gone, no, you know what? Yeah, you take it back. You try again.
And then he was asked today, like, what his confidence was in Addison Williams reassuming this role. And one of the parts of his answer was just basically there's more talent on the defense now. So what was it last year? Was it a talent issue or was it an Addison Williams issue? It was probably both. But it just sounded funny for him to be like, well, there's the defense is better talent-wise now, and I think he can handle it. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's going to – nothing magically is going to happen here. The schedule softens up a little bit in that you're playing an Arizona team, but they've got a great offense. Like, they have really good quarterback, really good receiver. But if they start to win a couple of games, it's not magically like, oh, UCS back on the right track. It's just, no, like, this is a flawed team. These were decisions that he made to kind of deflect from the noise because it's getting louder. It's getting a lot louder nationally, but it's also especially locally and on campus. It's like he's getting booed at Spirit Splash on Friday, and then the students are chanting "Fire Gus" at him as he's going into the tunnel. Like, it's getting louder, and I think maybe he realizes that and is like, oh, he's clearly not gonna. I think that's another thing. Part of these moves is like it's kind of a signal of he ain't resigning or retiring at the end of this year. This is the setting into motion his plans for this offseason because he's going to be back. And
yes,
we're going to
that's a very strong point to make because these aren't the moves you make because this isn't, I mean, I just want fans to be clear that I don't know. I'm sure it's happened at some point, but I don't know of many examples where a team starts firing coaches midseason and they magically get better. I mean, the team is what it is at this point. And Gus even said that in his press conference. He said that this isn't the point of the season where they can make overhaul changes. This is just straight up saying we're going to have someone else run the defense and see if it goes better. And listen, I don't know who makes decisions on defense. We never got the answer on distribution of tasks, but there have been things like Dalen Dotson comes in as defensive end, really highly touted transfer, had a lot of success at the FCS level. Season comes around, they've moved him to DT. We don't see a ton of them. What we see isn't overly impressive. BYU, he moves back to defensive end, his natural position. He graded 90.9 on PFF, which is, I think, the highest grade of any player on either side of the ball this entire season.
He made their national team of the week, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think he did.
So, yes. So there are examples of this isn't just, they didn't assemble the players. There have been players in the wrong places. And I don't know if that's a roof decision, whatever, but so maybe you convince yourself that way. But should we move on to the other half of this?
In a second, because I'm curious about the personnel. Like you just mentioned that we talked about it. I don't remember, you and I talked about it in person, and I don't remember if we talked about it on the podcast or not, but X3 Alexander's been playing pretty well. And it seems like for some reason to get him on the field, they just shifted Deshaun Pace over to like the nickel spot and kept Ethan Barr on the field. I wonder if that move was a Ted Roof thing or not, or if now that Roof is gone, will we be able to see, instead of Ethan Barr out there, because Ethan Barr has not been playing well, X3 Alexander and Deshaun Pace at linebacker. I think the ceiling for the defense is a lot higher with those two at linebacker than with Ethan Barr out there. So I don't know. We'll see if there's personnel moves are made around.
Yeah, Roof coaches linebacker, so I'm confident that was his decision
to
do that. And I agree with you. It's very weird that Deshaun Pace, who's probably been the biggest playmaker on defense so far this year, has kind of been neutralized by moving him out of position to get X-ray on the field. And maybe there is some intricate football thing I'm missing of why it needs to be Ethan Barr plus one of those two versus just letting them play together. I don't know, but yeah, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, we can move on to the other half of this, which would be Gus Malzahn announcing that he is giving up play calling again for his second time now at UCF. We're actually at almost exactly a year since he announced he was taking back play calling midseason, that he's now giving it up again.
I think, because I don't know, they really announced it last year.
Or they announced it last year, but just did it happen last year. But I think
legitimately, I think it's 1 year to the day, because did he take it, or he took it back after West Virginia, right?
We think it's still there's conflicting on when he did take it back, but either way, it's been right about a year that he said what isn't working is I'm not calling plays.
Hey, the West Virginia game was October 28th, 2023. It is October 28th, 2024.
Yeah,
and Gus has decided to give up play calling.
And
to Tim
this
Harris.
one is extra infuriating because it's the Auburn article we just talked about from ESPN. It's just the flip. This has been his whole career as a head coach, is flip-flopping back and forth between, well, I need to be the play caller, and then, well, actually, no, the problem was I was the play caller. And what was so infuriating for me to hear is, again, go read my thing from January where I said, hey, Gus taking over play calling is bad because he needs to be focusing on all the other parts of being a head coach. Most major head coaches have moved away from calling plays on either side of the ball because of the way college football has changed. And he was asked, I don't remember if it was this offseason or the start of the season, where he was asked by Trace Trilko about how he's going to make time for this, when he said last year, well, I need to focus on these other things. And he gave some non-answer about, well, he needs to call plays. He announces today he's giving up play calling, and he says he's doing it because he needs to be focusing on those other things. And it feels like deja vu. We did this all a year ago, and now we're doing it again. And it's so frustrating because it further feeds what fans and media and everyone have been talking about, of just the lack of vision and the lack of direction of this program, that it feels like Gus is just casting about at this point for random fixes to see what's going to work. And when does it end? Where does it end?
Here, I'm curious of your thoughts on this. Week 1 next year, is Gus Malzahn calling plays?
Probably. Okay, so here's my take on this. I'm going to say yes, because Tim Harris has not been set up for success here for calling offensive plays. They've got 4 games left on the schedule. The schedule is lighter, but they, as of now, do not know who the quarterback is. We don't know if it's going to be Jakari Brown or EJ Colson or Dylan Risk. Literally, we're just sitting here going, who's it going to be? And
KJ Jefferson.
KJ Jefferson, maybe. None of those 3 or 4 are awesome options. And we've seen that this offense just really isn't capable of putting up points. And so I actually see the roadmap laid for Gus to give it over to Tim Harris, for the offense to not get better, and for him at the end of the season to say, well, look how bad we were when I wasn't calling plays. My duty is to call plays. I see that roadmap laid out. Do you not?
I know I do, but I worry. I don't know. I'm worried about it because, I think that's true. And if it doesn't get any better, I would hope he's smart enough and self-aware enough to just say, okay, that didn't work. Let me actually hire an offensive coordinator. It's a dream at this point. He's not going to retire. He's not going to leave. I don't think they're going to fire him because they don't have any money.
Yep. And
it would be a dream of mine for him to go out and get some young, innovative offensive coordinator and say, hey, you run the offense. I'm the CEO here of this football program. You run the offense. You run your system. But Gus has never done that, and he's not going to do that. I just don't see it happening. So, I agree that maybe it's not going to go well the last 4 games. He'd be like, all right, I'm back. I'll call the plays here against whoever they open with.
Yeah.
I think Jack State or something.
Because he's stubborn. He's too much. I mean, we've seen that. And this is a trait of a lot of head coaches, but he's too much of a control freak. He always there's never a situation where, because even Tim Harris, like, guys, let's be clear, the offense is not going to look dramatically, probably not at all different in this coming game.
Offense.
Still Gus's offense. You can't install a new offense with 4 games to go in the season. It's just going to be a different guy deciding what plays are called in the moment. I think that's a benefit. And I do think it's a benefit that Tim Harris can lock in on that completely and focus on that, where Gus was trying to do that and 19 million other things every week. And maybe you find new things to expose. You come up with different options. It'll probably help to some extent. And I laugh at the money thing just because they're paying Ted Roof $1.2 million to go away. I'm laughing so much at that it's almost like Gus said, let me make sure there's no money to fire me by spending it on the coordinators to get them out of here right now. But I just feel like we're caught in a time loop. I really never would have imagined when Gus came in from Auburn that it would play out exactly like this, but it's just another example of it, is the flip-flopping on, am I the CEO or am I calling plays? And he comes into UCF in 2021 and says, I'm going to call plays for the rest of my career. After the 2022 season, he says, I'm done calling plays. Takes play calling back during 2023, now halfway through 2/3 of the way through 2024, says, I'm done calling plays. I need to be the CEO. It's just constant flipping back and forth. And even if what you just said is spot on, even if he decides, no, I'm not going to call plays next year, there is no innovative offense coming in. There is no young, bright mind who's going to change things up. It's going to be, I will allow someone else to call plays of my offense, probably with my hovering and interfering when I don't agree. And that will be it. I mean, how much say does is Tim Harris deciding who starts at quarterback, or is Gus? Gus is still deciding that.
Yeah.
So
I do get curious, and I don't think it didn't look that different. It looked a little different maybe under Darren Hinshaw last year. But again, we all were talking about the whole time, who's really calling the plays. We were thinking, Darren Hinshaw is calling plays out of Gus's system, his playbook, all of that. It's going to be the same thing with Tim Harris. I'm just curious to see if the approach looks any different, and what kind of freedom he has to actually come up with his own game plan and implement his own, his own structure within what he's being given. I don't know. I don't know if it'll look any different. I hope it does, just because it's been boring and frustrating to watch outside of RJ Harvey, who's really been the only player outside of, I guess, Kobe Hudson too, whose status is up in the air. It's this offense right now. If Kobe Hudson's hurt, this offense is RJ Harvey and no one else. So I would love to see if Tim Harris can figure something out with that. And
maybe Tim Harris just sits down and says, I think we should just let RJ Harvey have 30 carries every game.
Let him cook.
I'd probably
give him 30 carries.
I don't think it's a bad thing, not just to have a different mind on this, but also to have a mind that is focused entirely on this. I maybe we'll see. But it's also one of those things where I love how they always do it at this point in the schedule, because it's going to be hard to decide what's what, because the schedule is lighter now. They're playing an Arizona team that's really bad and can't generate offense. They've got a Utah team left who's just completely falling apart and lost to Houston. A West Virginia team who's probably going to fire their coach. Like, the schedule gets easier. So it's going to be hard to, I don't know. It's a funny time to make the change, because now it's like, you see what happens. But I'm especially, I feel more encouraged, not even encouraged, but just, I feel it's more likely we see different things and possible improvements on defense than we will on offense, because I think at the end of the day, whoever you want to call plays on offense, it's just not a good offense. It's an antiquated offense without a lot of good players. And that's not a winning combo.
And like you said, it does make me laugh, the timing of it, because we've talked about it on the postgame pod on Saturday. They got to win 3 out of 4 to still make a bowl game.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I still don't think they will. But with the schedule and with these moves, it's almost like if they do it, I'm just going to be like, you just, I don't know. It's going to like look like this big genius move, and everyone, hopefully no one falls for it.
But. And let's live in the reality for a second where they finish 3-1 and they make a bowl game. Let's call this exactly what it was. The two things that they corrected, getting rid of Roof and having Gus stop calling plays, are the two decisions they made this past offseason where we said, why are they doing that? So they don't get to turn this into, we're the heroes who figured out what was wrong. You created these problems. As everyone shouted at you saying, why are you creating these problems? You don't get to get high-fived for cleaning up your own mess.
And that's the thing too, is I haven't tweeted too much about it because I've just been dealing with some other stuff this morning, but people were saying, or I don't know, the firing happened, and it's been 8 games. And I just hope everyone, I know people said, oh, Ted Roof, how many times can this guy get fired? But we got to remember, Gus is the one who brought him in. This was a Gus decision from the beginning. So him firing him shouldn't be like, oh, I guess Gus is off the hook. He made this decision. No, Gus brought him in. It was a bad decision from the start, and it played out as a bad decision. And like you said, he took back play calling. That was his decision this offseason. And now, the recruiting class is kind of falling apart. And he's like, oh, I got to be the CEO again and focus on recruiting, transfer portal, all that stuff. So, like, how many times can he realize that he needs to do that before he just actually sits there and is like, oh, yeah, this is my role for good? Probably another time or two.
I was going to say, turns out at least one more time being this. And I don't know. I think he did this for 6 years at Auburn, or 7 years, however long he was there, doing this back and forth. And this is year 4 at UCF, and he's made this call 3 times now. So it's just, it's probably just, this is just the reality of Malzahn as your head coach, is you're going to flip back and forth. And that's that. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway is, we'll see what happens. The other biggest takeaway is what you said, is that I'm significantly less confident in that he'll just retire this offseason theory, because I don't think these are decisions you make if you're planning to be done coaching in a month.
That's why I think I've been feeling worse as the day has gone on. I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of setting in where it's just like, he's just getting a head start on all the stuff he's going to try to sell this offseason as, got to make these changes and get back on track. And just don't think they're going anywhere under him. And we're just stuck here. And I hate it.
It's fun.
Sure isn't, but we'll be here to talk about it, I guess. So
definitely, as always, no matter how bad it gets, we will be here talking about how bad it is.
Yeah. Anything else? Or are we good to get out of here before we resume our regularly scheduled programming tomorrow?
I think we're good. You'll hear from us tomorrow on the 90 billion other things to discuss.
Yeah, we'll be back talking a little recruiting, talking about the Arizona game, the space uniforms, all that stuff. Very shortly. But until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We will talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.